The story begins on the streets of the Great Canyon, where we see a newly married couple. The husband, Nick, and the wife, Stella. Both of them have come here to celebrate their honeymoon because this place is Nick's dream destination. He wants to hike here but keeps it a secret from Stella to surprise her. They stay in a hotel that is very close to the canyon. The next day, before leaving, Nick tells Stella, "I've made a plan for us. We're going to the canyon." Stella is not very happy because she doesn't enjoy such places, but she agrees for Nick's happiness. Both of them visit a nearby tourist shop to buy some guidebooks and discover that they need a permit to go there. So, they go to a nearby permit office and are shocked to learn that it will take months to get the permit, while they only have a short time. Stella tells Nick, "We should go somewhere else. I just want to spend time with you, no matter where it is." However, Nick feels disheartened. Visiting the canyon has been his lifelong dream, and the thought of missing it troubles him. That night, they visit a bar and start talking about their situation. An older man overhears their conversation and introduces himself as Henry, a tour guide. He tells them, "I can take you to the canyon. I know every place here." Nick says, "But we don't have a permit." Henry replies, "I have a permit." Nick becomes very happy and agrees. The next morning, the couple sets off with Henry, riding horses. Along the way, they encounter some dangerous trails, but Henry skillfully guides them through. After some time, they come across a riverbank where they rest. Henry tells Nick and Stella about a nearby cave that few people ever visit. Excited, the couple agrees and explores the cave. The place is truly breathtaking. They hug each other and vow never to separate. Upon returning, Henry suggests, "We should go further. I don't have permission for that area, but if you're brave enough, I can take you." Stella protests, "I'm tired. We should go back now." But Nick, determined to go further, convinces her to continue. As they proceed, they come across remnants of history left behind by past visitors. However, an accident occurs when Henry's horse is startled by a snake and starts running wildly. The other horses follow suit, and all three of them fall. Henry is bitten by the snake, but manages to kill it. Unfortunately, he breaks his arm in the fall and cannot get up. Henry instructs Nick, "Go and catch the horses." Nick finds one of the horses and ties it up with great difficulty. When he returns, Henry suggests, "It'll be dark soon. We should set up camp here and continue in the morning." Nick agrees, lights a fire, and they prepare to sleep. They are all hungry, so Henry tells them to eat the snake. With some effort, Nick cooks it, but Stella, being a vegetarian, refuses to eat and stays hungry. That night, they hear wolves howling. Henry warns them, "These are wild wolves. We have to be careful." Morning comes, but Henry's condition worsens as the snake venom spreads through his body. Nick and Stella decide to seat him on the horse and continue their journey, as going back is no longer an option. They travel further, but as night falls again, they stop to camp on a high mountain. While looking for firewood, they hear a noise. When they investigate, they find Henry lying on the ground, but the horse threw him off and ran away. Nick chases the horse, but by the time he returns, Henry has died. Now, only Nick and Stella are left in this vast, desolate area with no idea how to escape. Stella breaks down, crying in fear, but Nick encourages her to spend the night there. They bury Henry nearby and fall asleep. However, in the middle of the night, Nick wakes up and sees a wild wolf. He does not sleep because if he does, Stella's life could be in danger, so he stays awake the whole night. The next morning, he finds some footprints in the sand, which he erases because he knows Stella would get more scared if she saw them. Time keeps passing, and it has been more than 3 days now. He and Stella are just roaming around, unable to find a way out. Nick tells her, "The receptionist said our checkout is on Monday. If they don't find us in our room, they might send a rescue team." However, Stella insists they find a way out as soon as possible. They start walking aimlessly, and after wandering for hours, they end up back at the same spot from where they started. Both of them grow frustrated and start fighting. Stella shouts angrily, "I didn't want to come here, but I did because of you." Nick, realizing his mistake, says, "You're right, but instead of fighting, we should focus on getting out of here." At that moment, Stella gets a weak signal on her phone, but it quickly disappears. Nick suggests, "We need to get to higher ground to make a call." They spot a tall mountain in the distance, which seems nearly impossible to climb. However, Nick says, "We have no other choice." They begin climbing it. As they ascend, they manage to get a signal, and Stella quickly calls for help. Unfortunately, the signal drops again. Determined, they climb higher, and Stella successfully makes an emergency call. But just as they begin to feel relief, Nick's hand slips. He falls, taking Stella with him. Though Stella lands unscathed, Nick falls onto a rock, breaking his leg. His foot gets trapped under a boulder. Nick screams in pain while Stella desperately tries to free him, but all her efforts are in vain. The pain overwhelms Nick, and he loses consciousness. When he regains consciousness, he sees a wolf staring at him. Unsure of what to do, he panics, but Stella arrives with a large stick and chases the wolf away. She tries using the stick to move the stone trapping Nick's leg, but it's too heavy. Exhausted, she listens as Nick shares a story about a man who survived a similar situation in the canyon by cutting off his own hand. Nick insists, "I'm ready to cut my leg off. It's the only way to survive." Stella refuses, saying she doesn't have the courage to do such a thing. Nick pleads, "If you don't do this, we'll both die here." Reluctantly, Stella agrees, but they need a knife, which they don't have. Nick remembers that Henry had a knife. He tells Stella to go back to the place where they buried Henry and retrieve it. Stella musters the courage to dig up Henry's body and retrieve the knife. After burying him again, she returns to Nick. Seeing Nick's still body, she panics, thinking he's dead. She quickly heats the knife and presses it to his leg to rouse him. Nick regains consciousness, and Stella breathes a sigh of relief. Nick insists, "Cut my leg now." Though hesitant, Stella prepares herself. She places a piece of wood in Nick's mouth to muffle his screams and begins cutting his leg with the hot knife. She listens carefully to his heartbeat to ensure he stays alive. After cutting through the flesh, she uses a rock to break the bone and finally frees his leg. Nick loses consciousness again due to the immense pain, and blood flows profusely. Stella uses the heated knife to cauterize the wound, stopping the bleeding. Exhausted, she falls asleep. When she wakes up, she sees a pack of wolves surrounding her, attracted by the smell of blood. Acting quickly, she lights a fire to scare them off and runs to gather more wood. Upon returning, she encounters a wolf that attacks her. Thankfully, she uses the knife to fend it off and manages to return to the fire. The wolves return, attempting to attack her. Stella creates a perimeter of fire torches and prepares to fight. They attack her, wounding her legs, but she refuses to give up. She fights back, killing one of the wolves with a knife. The rest of the pack retreats, but is likely to return. The next morning, Stella and Nick sit near the body of the dead wolf. It has been almost 9 days without food. Stella cooks the wolf's meat and keeps some for later. But here, she has to leave. She makes a wooden stretcher for Nick and starts dragging it forward. Along the way, Nick asks for water, but they don't have any. Despite this, she gives him a piece of meat. Seeing this, he says, "You are a vegetarian, right?" She hands him the food, but Nick doesn't have the strength to eat. He drops the piece from his mouth. After a while, Stella lifts the stretcher again, but this time, it breaks, causing Nick to fall. Nick, exhausted and in pain, tells Stella, "Just leave me here. I don't have the strength to go on. Please, just go." However, Stella refuses to listen. She finds a large piece of wood nearby, uses it to support Nick, and helps him stand. They continue moving, but they can't go far before stopping again to rest. At this point, Stella decides to change the bandage on Nick's leg, as it had started to get infected. When she unwraps it, she discovers his leg is in terrible condition. She cuts away the worst part and uses a torn piece of her clothing to bandage it again. Unfortunately, the smell of blood attracts the wolves, who return. Nick repeatedly begs Stella, "Please go. Save yourself." But she refuses to leave him. Stella lifts him up once more, but after a few minutes, she collapses from exhaustion. Lying on the ground, she pleads with Nick to get up, but he has already fainted. Suddenly, a wolf approaches her, but 2 more wolves appear and start pulling at her legs. They momentarily back off, but soon the wolves begin circling her from all sides. At this point, Stella begins to lose hope. However, she cannot bear the thought of leaving Nick to die at the mercy of the wolves. She decides to make the most difficult choice of her life, to end his suffering herself. Through tears, she apologizes to Nick, explaining she didn't want to hurt him, and places her hand over him. Nick's breathing stops and he dies. Stella sits there, devastated, recalling the day they married and the promise Nick made, that he would never leave her until his death. Perhaps he kept that promise because, in her mind, she believes she too will soon die by his side. But then, the biggest twist of the story unfolds. Just moments after Nick dies, a rescue team arrives. Seeing them, Stella bursts into tears. One thought torments her. She had supported Nick for 11 days. If she had just held on a little longer, he could have been saved. Instead, she killed him with her own hands, her love, her husband. The rescuers take Stella back to the city in a helicopter. And so, this tragic story comes to an end. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. subscribe, and press the bell icon for more videos.